in the instance, like for myself, we're here in California. Okay, my parents worked in the fields, literally, right? So, are my parents like we're native, but were we enrolled in a tribe? No,
A lot of southern tribes don't federally exist.
it didn't, especially in
Yeah.
California. And then so kind of giving you a little brief history. There's a going back. Why are we in California? Why are we over here? Why are my parents come over here? Right. So in the early 1900s, whether it's the Salt Wars, they have literally wars with the Texas Rangers, where Mexicans they kidnapped and they arrested 18 Texas Rangers and they imprisoned them.
No shit.
Yeah, in El
Oh
Paso,
man.
Texas, right? Or 30 or 40 miles from where my grandparents are from Pecos, Texas, they call it La Matancia. So in the early 1900s, you had Texas Rangers coming over here, right? And they were hanging Mexicans.
Mm.
And then so even if you break that down even deeper, because you have the Cahuitecos, you have the natives and what have you, and then so the only way they could get land from Mexico when it was part of Mexico is that, you have to be registered, quote unquote, as a Mexican, not a native. So when I refer to Texas Mexicans, Tejanos, you're like, okay, wait a minute, where's the brink here? Where's how does it come together? Natives and Mexicans in Texas. So the only way to get benefits or to get your birth certificate or what have you, you had to be marked as a Mexican because you're a part of the Mexican government at the time, even though you were a native,
Hmm.
right? So when the Texas Rangers came in, they hung a bunch of Mexicans, and then even there's a massacres that happened. So to all the Gatling guns and what have you. So a bunch of like this happened really close to where my grandparents were born. They all went either to southern New Mexico by Carlsbad and Roswell and what have you, or some of them actually left and went to California.
Mm.
So how does that link up to being state recognized or being federally recognized?
Yeah, it doesn't.
It doesn't add up. The math does not add up. So when you put that stipulation and say, okay, you know what, you know, you can only be part of this Native American church if your state are fairly recognized, then wait a minute, the math does not add
They
up.
use those same laws to steal land from natives because we
Exactly.
weren't technically American, so we couldn't claim the
Yeah.
lands outside of the reservation.
Mhm.
And if we didn't divvy up the lands to plots and give each native a specific
Uh-huh.
plot, then they would allow people who were American to come and just settle on those lands. So uh, the laws that they use to murder, I mean, get
Mhm.
natives to register as Mexican are the same laws they
Uh-huh.
use to steal land from from natives. So
Correct.
that's yeah, they did a lot of shady, messed up stuff to our people.
So if you break it down to the Native American church, if you it should be legal. It should be uh, controlled. Number
Hmm.
one, and then it should be. I really do believe that it should be case by case regarding if you're not federally recognized, if you're not state recognized. It
Like if
should.
someone sponsors
If
you.
someone sponsors, and in my case, it was sponsored by elders. It was
Hmm.
sponsored by documentation. Okay, you know what? So I had literally had to sit down with literally face to face sit down with DEA agents, and say, okay, who are you? You got so and so and so, and they knocked on the doors of my elders in South Texas and say,
Mm.
knocked on their doors and what have you, Fish and Wildlife for Migratory Bird Act and what have you. Okay, who are your sponsors? And then that's even doing some of the laws, the Fiscal Court of Appeals, the federal laws say, okay,
So migratory bird act, meaning like that's surrounding you can't have eagle feathers unless you're Native American,
yeah,
right?
yeah. So before 19, I think it's like 2012, before it was only federally recognized tribal members, enrolled federally member tribal members. All right, and then a couple of elders got, their feathers were confiscated from them to Ponapache and went up to the Fiscal Court of Appeals. Then now the law changes where it could be state if you're state recognized. Okay, and then so if your state
Like
recognized,
rancherias and things
yeah,
like that.
rancherias, or even like especially in Texas or other states where like Arizona, the majority of them are federally recognized, but like you might have for example, like here in California, San Fernando Valley, the Tongva, or what have you, they're state recognized, but they don't have reservations, right? So then they're not they're only state recognized, they're not federally recognized.
Mm.
So the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals says that, you know what, if you're a Native American from a state recognized tribe, then you could have birds of migratory bird act. Then you could, that falls under the umbrella of
Mhm.
that, right? So that's kind of where I'm at, where my feathers, and I've had my house raided by the FBI, by the Fish and Wildlife. I've had my feathers confiscated. I've fought
Oh
for them.
man,
I fought for them. They have elders writing me letters, sponsor me, and then so like I know how it is to have my me and my kids at gunpoint.
that's wild.
Yeah.
So the FBI and the
Yeah.
DEA came in. They kicked your
And
door down. They
everything.
held you
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
gunpoint.
Everything.
SWAT team,
It-
basically,
it-
and they.
yeah, and then so I fought for them. So and I kind
How did that happen?
of
They just knew you were doing ceremonies, or
yeah. What? But it's a very, if you take the bias out of it,
Mhm.
like literally the bias out of it, right, and say coming from an officer's point of view, because you have to look at different point of views. Is you have this guy, he's light complected, he's in California, he's running peyote ceremonies. Uh, what's going on here?
Mhm.
We're going to investigate, see what's going on. And the only way to investigate is to get a search warrant. When we get a search warrant, come to my house. So even though I don't agree with that, because I don't agree with it, but I understand that, because you have to come from a non-biased point of view. Because what happens now is that you have a bunch of new agers, who are doing ayahuasca ceremonies, or doing mushroom ceremonies, or doing all these other,
And they're mixing them all at
they're
once.
mixing all in one, and they're calling themselves the Native American Church, and they're doing this and all kinds of stuff, and then and they have all these feathers and what have you. So it's like, okay, I understand it.
I feel like a lot of time with those new agers too, it's people who aren't even necessarily indigenous. They just happen to go down to Costa Rica and participate in a ceremony, and then they had an incredible experience. So they stay down there for a few months and they learned a little bit, and now they're trying to bring it back here and do it like, oh, there's not enough out here going on. I need to bring enlightenment to people, which is a good idea, but at the same time, it should be reserved for those who.
Oh, extremely, and especially even like birds, because now you have a whole thing now where which I get it. I totally understand, in the sense of, you have people who come around for a couple of years, and they kind of, it's just a chapter in their life ceremonies. It's just a chapter in their lives, and then before you know it, they start acquiring scissor tails, like anhinga water birds. These are eagle feathers. And then it's like, these are sacred birds, and then they have them hanging like as a museum in their house, and they don't utilize these instruments. They're not going to ceremonies. They're not passing them down they're not bringing their children. Maybe they go back to smoking weed, or going back to drinking. This is a chapter in their lives. So it's
A fun story for their memoirs.
That's it.